Well, our investigative reporting is leading to changes inside BART's Police Department. One day after we released a brand new season of our digital series Derailed, focusing on how BART is coping with the pandemic and demands for police reform. It became a topic of discussion at the top of the agency. During today's BART board meeting, Director Bigad Shaban formally requested changes be made involving BART's Police Department.
I binge watched Derailed, and I want to say that I think that it fairly represented our strengths and challenges and raised some issues.
Now, in the past, BART's police chief made assurances that his officers collect demographic data from every person they arrest or detain. But new episodes of our digital series Derailed reveal that hasn't been the case for nearly a year during certain police operations. So, Dufty asked BART's general manager and police chief to begin collecting demographic data for every detention to better understand if BART's police operations are disproportionately impacting certain riders based on race. Okay, senior investigative reporter Bigad Shaban has been leading our coverage on BART. He joins us now live from the San Bruno BART station. Bigad, I think one of the big things now that people are really worried about is really whether it's safe for them to actually ride BART in the middle of this pandemic.
Yeah, Jess, that is the question on so many people's minds. And the reality is we still don't know so much about COVID-19, including the potential risks of contracting the virus while on BART, or frankly, anywhere else for that matter. But here is what we do know. BART tells us that the filtration systems on their trains right now can actually replace the air about every 70 seconds. And BART tells us it's actually testing out new filters that it hopes will do an even better job. The transit agency also wants to test out disinfecting robots. They were designed in Hong Kong. They can clean trains all on their own. Think of them as a sort of higher-end Roomba. But the reality is that even if BART decides to move forward with these innovations, the filters, the robots, it would still logistically likely take months before they're ever a reality here at BART.
Okay, another question. Before even the pandemic happened, you were really emphasizing all the issues that were happening with crime on BART, violent crime in many instances. Has that gone down since there's less riders on BART now, or what's the situation there?
Yeah, you know, about 90% of BART's riders aren't here anymore, but unfortunately, a lot of BART's problems still are. We're talking about fare evasion, drug use, violent crime you mentioned. You know, the reality is that now with fewer riders, the rate of violent crime, that's comparing sort of the ratio of crimes to passengers, has actually gone up, Jess. It's now 6 times higher what it was in the months leading up to the pandemic.
So can BART continue to even run the trains with the fact that there's so few riders and they're having so many financial hardships and the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that BART cannot afford to keep doing what it's doing. 65% of its budget is funded by passengers, but again, 90% of their riders aren't here anymore. So even early on in the pandemic, BART knew that the situation was pretty dire, and so it made what it described at the time was some pretty major budget cuts, and it passed a budget earlier this summer. What we now know is that the situation is actually far worse than BART ever imagined, so much so that BART actually recently came out and said that this year alone, Jess, they're expecting a $51 million shortfall that will actually snowball to $177 million next year. And so far, there are no plans on how to fill that gap, although come October, they'll have to make some pretty tough decisions.
That is a quandary indeed. Okay, thank you so much for your work, Bigad. Now, Derailed Season 2, our digital series about BART, is now up. You can binge watch it, just like Bigad Shaban did, the new episodes, and you can get caught up on the last season as well. You can find it on our YouTube channel, Apple TV, and of course at NBCBayArea.com/derailed.